In this next session, you'll see Josh Barry, Felicity Fair Thompson, and firstly, Steve Love as part of Right on White. If you enjoy the session, take a selfie and share your digital festival experience on our Facebook, Twitter or Instagram accounts to encourage your friends to join in too. So now, please give a virtual welcome to Josh Barry, Felicity Fair Thompson and Steve Love with Right on White.
Hi, I'm Steve Love and I'm from Ryde on the Isle of Wight, and this is my book. It's called The Bank Robber's Daughter. Underneath that it says she wanted to go straight but the bankers stole everything. And underneath that it says Steve Love. That's me. It's not really about bank robbers, though it's got plenty of bank robbers in it. It's about the financial crash, the credit crunch, and all the fraud, deceit, deception, dishonesty, and pure amoral behaviour that was exposed at the time of the banking crisis. I've been following the story right from the Northern Rock, if you remember that. 2007, those extraordinary images on the television screen of streets full of people in full colour, all queuing up, rushing to get their money out of a bank that had failed, the first one that had failed in Britain for 200 years. I was particularly shocked, I think, because I did history at school, and I remember, and if you did the same history as me, you'll have seen the same picture in the same textbook, the German worker carrying his wages home in the wheelbarrow in the financial crisis in Germany in the 1920s, and all that led on to Hitler and the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression and so on. But in the years that followed, lots of stuff emerged from that crisis. Frauds, deceits, swindles, all sorts of ghastly stuff. And it was all reported in the papers, books emerged on it. And I just followed it all, fascinated, because I knew right from the beginning, there's a story in here. And I don't mean a documentary story, there are plenty of documentaries. I mean a people story. And so I read up on all of these scams, read up all of these frauds and so on, had a whole head full of it. But the challenge was, how do you turn this into a story that somebody can read sort of on a deck chair or, you know, on a train or wherever you read your books? And what I thought, how do you tell it? I'm going to tell it as an old-fashioned family saga. I know this is an established way of telling a story. You take a family through 2 or 3 generations and they're just trying to get on with their lives and deal with things, but huge events buffet them. Well, these were huge, huge events. Some people were enormously affected by the credit crunch, the financial crisis, austerity and so on, losing jobs, homes, businesses, all sorts of things. Some emerged unscathed, some didn't. So that's how I told the story. I created a character, she's called Janie Laker, and she emerges in the 1970s. Her father is a bank robber, a good one, very successful one. She's a teenager and she becomes part of his gang. But when he is killed on a raid that goes wrong, she takes stock, she changes her life, she disappears, she re-emerges with a new identity and forges a new, honest life. And then, as the decades roll forward, she builds up a family, business, home, all very respectable and that sort of thing, until the book dumps us into the 2000s. And then, all of a sudden, it all collapses. The various rackets, frauds, scams and so on of the banking industry, the financial industry, the tax fraud industry and so on conspire to collapse her children. Her son ends up in prison, her daughter loses her job, she loses her business, their home is repossessed and so on. At her wit's end, she goes back to her old haunts, the East End of London, and finds her old gang, and she finds that they too have all been touched and harmed by all of these activities. And so she then visits her father's grave, and from words on the grave, I shan't say what they're on, they're in the book, words on the grave, she finds the inspiration to bring together her young family, her old friends from the gang, and they bring, let's say, a fitting end to the banks and the bankers that brought them all down. But I shan't say what it is because that would spoil the story. Suffice to say that there's a nice little chapter at the end, which is the revenge they took. And I enjoyed writing that chapter. That was perhaps my own little bit of revenge too. But I enjoyed taking Janie Laker, a woman, as my lead character, because it was more of a challenge, because as you can see, I'm not a woman, never have been. But I had to think through how possibly might a woman behave differently from a man in this circumstance or that circumstance. And for me, writing is a bit like acting. You have to place yourself into the character, and then the words just flow. You know what you'd say in those circumstances. You don't have to sort of make anything up in a formulaic sort of way. But we reach the end of the book with a degree of success, a degree of revenge, and quite a lot of irony at the end of it. I tried to lighten the story with some chirpy characters, but at the end of the day, it's a story of evil and greed, wrapped up in, hopefully, according to what people have told me, a nice readable story. Now, this is videoed, so you can't ask me questions, or at least not now. So what I will do is I will pose the 3 questions which everybody asks me. The first one is, how did you know so much about all these banking rackets? Were you a banker? No, I wasn't a banker. I was once a policeman, so I do know a little bit about the armed robbery side of the business, and it was nice to be able to use that in the book. But I just read the newspapers day after day, the financial pages, the business pages. Sometimes it broke onto the front pages. Probably, 20 or 30 different books where different people have come out from undercover and set it all out. And it's all out there. Nobody's really pulled it together into a single sort of documentary yet and so on. Probably my book is almost a documentary and a novel. But I've captured the credit crunch, the PPI is in there, liar loans, ninja mortgages, that's no income, no job mortgages, the credit default swaps which banks use to sort of hide all the money, the LIBOR frauds and so on. They're all in there, but hopefully just enough you know how they happened, but not enough to deflect you from the story. The second question people ask me is, how did you know so much about autism? What's autism got to do with it? Well, I've made one of my characters, he's called David, he's the bank robber's daughter's son. I've made him autistic, high-performing autistic. And this was quite deliberate. Quite a few of the very successful people in all businesses and all walks of life, including banking, are on that spectrum somewhere. It gives them the drive and the focus and so on to get the job done. As far as I know, the only banker to have gone to jail as a result of the entire banking crisis was an autistic trader. He's out now. I've read his story. I have a great deal of sympathy. But I haven't taken him, because you can't, but I've taken somebody a bit like him. Somebody who will do whatever their boss says, responds to the praise, but doesn't check, is this wise, is it sensible, even is it allowed? Ends up deep inside all of these crimes, and then when they're discovered, the bosses walk away and let him carry the can for the whole lot. And a lot of people recognise that character, and I've been pleasantly surprised. Nobody said, why have you made the main character a woman? But they've said, how do you know so much about autism? And then the third question is, how did you find a publisher? And the answer is, I couldn't. I tried really hard. I did all the things it says. I contacted not just sort of scattergun, but which looked like the right agents that covered the right material, the right sort of books and so on. I got one response back, this looks intriguing, which was great, but that sort of fizzled out. They did send, I've got to say, very nice rejection emails. I know they're all a bit formulaic, but at least they went to the trouble. I came to the conclusion that whatever other people think about agents, they're mostly nice people just doing a job. No, I had to resort, and I'm not proud of this, resort to Amazon, but I've got to say it is extraordinarily easy. They know how to make it easy, design your cover and so on. It's surprisingly cheap, and you can produce, 1 copy, 2 copies, 3 copies. You don't have to produce 1,000 and then try and sell them all. It goes straight onto Kindle at the same time. So my plan, I have a plan, is to sell enough through Amazon and Kindle and build up some reviews so that one day I can go back to the publishers, hopefully while people still remember the credit crunch and the banking crisis and so on, and say, can we try again?
Well, Steve, that was very good, I have to say. Books are published in kind of like almost chapter form. In other words, you get the first version of the book free, and then the next one comes out and you pay for it and pay for the next one on from that. So does that mean that you've got part 2 of The Bank Robber's Daughter?
Well, no, Amazon actually, I don't like to sing their praises because elsewhere in the book I give a bit of a sort of slap to organisations that don't pay their tax in this country. But it was the only way and the easiest. No, they're very... The book itself, they'll produce it as this book, and each time I order one, I guess they print one, it arrives 2 days later. So that comes by the book. And anybody else the same way. $6.75 on Amazon, or same price from me. You have to pay postage unless you've got Amazon Prime, but remarkably good quality print, paper, size. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the book. Kindle, you can either buy it as a one-off. I like it when people do that because I get £1.49. Or if you've got the sort of Kindle Unlimited Direct thing, then I get paid by the page. So I keep turning the pages over.
So to self-publicise actually is very straightforward and not expensive.
Straightforward, not expensive. I was very, very surprised. But I don't view that as the end of the matter. I view it as the stepping stone to, really getting in.
What advice have you got then to other budding writers?
My advice would be the character, be the person. If you can make yourself the person, and obviously you've got several people, so you have to be, perhaps in the course of a page, you've got to be, 3 or 4 people. But if you can be that person, I'm lucky because I've got a sort of huge imagination. If you are that person, it becomes so much easier to then know what you would say or what you would do in response to what somebody else has said or done. And the words just sort of flow. Then, of course, you have to go and edit and tidy and trim and so on. But you've got the core of it by just living inside your own story.
And how many rejection letters or emails do you need before you actually say, right, I'm going to self-publicise?
I'm not going to embarrass myself or you or the very people I've written to by disclosing that quite large number.
Felicity Fair Thompson writes films, plays, poetry, novels and stories for children. Her film about Carisbrooke Castle was shown on Sky TV, and from that came her play Exit the King about Charles I. Now a miniature version of the Isle of Wight is the setting for her new children's book, Grandpa's Dear Old Girl.
Hello, I'm Felicity Fair Thompson, and I really love living on the Isle of Wight. It gives me an enormous amount of inspiration. One of the nice things is that because I have lived by the sea all my life, I grew up in Sydney by the Harbour Bridge. So there was the sea, even if it was in the harbour. But also I've lived on the Isle of Wight for over 40 years, and I just love the coastline. It's a beautiful place to live. And it does inspire me. When I was making a film about the Isle of Wight, one of the things that my cameraman and I did was to go to the top of the Needles Lighthouse, which was very exciting. We went in an RNLI lifeboat around through Freshwater Bay to the lighthouse, and we had to jump off onto the rocks in quite rocky waves, but we landed safely. And we went up what is a very tall lighthouse, and really very beautiful. A bit like this picture in the book. So we climbed to the top, up the curved staircase, another picture that appears in this book that Carolyn Pavey has illustrated for me. And right up to the top to see the lamp and the amazing view all the way along the Solent. And hear the foghorn and film the last lighthouse keeper. And while we were there, because it was being automated, we were the last people up the lighthouse before automation. And they gave me the very last light bulb that was used before the automation, which is rather exciting to have. Of course, I've kept it, and in a way it was an inspiration for writing Grandpa's Dear Old Girl, because Millie's grandpa is the lighthouse keeper, and they decide to automate the lighthouse. What will Grandpa do? Millie's very worried. she says to him that, of course, he can live with them. He doesn't have to sleep in the curved in the lighthouse anymore. He can live with them. But it's very sad for Grandpa because he actually has lived all his life there. When the lighthouse is automated, that's fine. Grandpa comes to terms with it. But all the same, an automated lighthouse can't tell when a big storm is coming. It can't remember wild big storms. And so Grandpa can. He knows what to do. He and Millie go to the lighthouse and they help save the fishermen who are out near the rocks. And then they have to run to the other end of the island, to the lowlands. Sands just like the Isle of Wight. This book is very much based on being a miniature Isle of Wight. You've got the lighthouse on the high ground at the end, and at the other end are the lowlands, which are wide sands all over. So Millie and her grandpa run down to the sands, and one of the fishing boats has got caught out on the sands. Can Millie now save her grandpa? She's learned a lot along the way. She's listened to her grandpa, and they've talked about how lighthouses work. But the lighthouse lamp goes out. Now what? Will Millie be able to save her grandpa? You have to read the book to find out what happens.
Did the lockdown over the past 18 months, 2 years, help you with your writing, or did it hinder you? Did you manage, because you obviously had a bit more time on your hands at home?
Well, actually, yes. Although I do teaching, and I was doing a lot of editing online, so actually, in some ways, I was busier. And I was writing this book, and I've been writing other books as well while lockdown's been on. So, in a way, it was an advantage to me. One of the interesting things is the Lights of Leicester Square, which when I was young, I worked in Leicester Square. It sounds like I'm a suffragette, but I was the first woman employed by rank as on front of house management in the West End. And it was a very exciting 9 years of my life. And so I've written a kind of memoir about that. And I've called it The Lights of Leicester Square, the golden years of cinema. And it has all sorts of beautiful photographs of the royal family, of stars galore. There's a picture of me and Roger Moore and at a party. And it's a book which really does cover some wonderful events. And the Royal Film Performance was there every year. So we had lots of royal interest.
And that's coming out later this year?
It's coming out at the end of the year, yes.
Well, Millie sounds like quite a character, and her grandfather. Is she going to come back in another adventure?
I'm not at all sure. I've just written another book called Chrissy and the Sea Witch, which is about another little girl. So maybe Millie will. I'd quite like to write about Harry, who's in my novel The Kid on Slapton Beach as well. But both of those would be quite interesting to follow up on, because in a way Millie has done what she's going to do, and she wants to be work for a lifeboat when she grows up. So actually that's a nice future. Maybe I can write about that. But she would have to be older.
Well, Felicity, there's obviously lots of books still ready to come out of that hand of yours and your head. So well done that, and keep having the island inspire you to do it.
I will. Thank you very much indeed for having me. It's the Isle of Wight is so beautiful. It's the coastline and being near the sea, I think, is so lovely. Because I grew up beside Sydney Harbour Bridge, so I was near the sea when I was a little girl. So the sea matters.
Writer and podcaster Josh Barry was diagnosed with athetoid cerebral palsy following complications with his birth on the Isle of Wight. A determination to live a full life led him to university, where he undertook a BA in scriptwriting for film and television and an MA in writing for the media. After uni, he realised that interviewing was something he took a lot of pleasure from. Now into its 5th year, Josh's podcast, Beyond the Title, is still going strong and the subject of a nationwide tour. The first lockdown gave Josh the opportunity to reflect upon his extensive catalogue of interviews and became the inspiration for his second book, Beyond the Title, The Yearbook. Profiling over 40 of Britain's best-loved figures, with an original foreword by the comedy legend Barry Cryer, this book tells the enigmatic story of Britain's show business past and present through the personal stories of some of its biggest stars. You've managed to get to so many famous people. How do you get that introduction to them?
I've been contacting celebrities now for over 10 years.
I've been contacting celebrities for over 10 years now.
I don't know each and every item, and once you know the avenue, go then for each person, you know who to go and who not.
Yeah, so over the years I've worked out that I've got to know each and every agent, and that has sort of helped me go down to each avenue that I need to, depending on what type of celebrity that I want to interview.
Now the pandemic has made things a little difficult because, like for everybody, so you've had to do things remotely.
At first, I was a little scared about some people I like to see people react.
Yeah, first of all, I was sceptical of the medium because what I like to see is people's reactions, physically, person to person, when you ask certain questions.
And I thought some motion that but I've been surprised how it worked.
And Josh didn't think that Zoom would deliver that sort of like that feel, but he's been pleasantly surprised as how it's come across.
So how do you ask a question?
Well, I do the research myself, and then I told the question you I have and get my PA delivery.
So I do all the research myself, and I type out all the questions using my nose on my iPad, and then I get one of my PAs to deliver said questions.
Which is what you do.
This is exactly what I do, yeah. I'm one of his team.
And that's how I wrote my book.
And that's how he wrote his book.
Yes. That's a lot of nose presses to the iPad, isn't it, for writing a book?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, good job. I didn't get a blister.
Yeah, a lot of nose action, and it's a good job he didn't get a blister.
Yes, absolutely. Well, tell us about the book then. What's in the book?
Well, German lockdown on the idea to create one in open coming for year problem.
So during lockdown, he had the idea to collate all his favourite interviews, as he's been doing for about 4 years.
But I didn't just want round about my favourite interviews on it because
But he didn't just want it to be a book about all his favourite interviews, he wanted to go a bit deeper into it.
I wanted to explore the entertainment landscape from the film of overflowing of my previous subject.
He wanted to explore the entertainment landscape for 40 of his previous subjects.
So I went in to the subject landscape of one that were famous and more helping attract the time they have.
So I wanted to delve into the social and the economic landscape of it all and why they were famous and how they got their fame and maintained it.
That's an interesting subject in that way. Did they answer honestly?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because a lot of them are usually shocked by the line of questioning because they're probably expecting like a light-hearted approach and not such a theoretical approach. Yeah, he likes that though because it catches them off guard and then you get more of an honest answer out of them.
The problem with submitting written questions is it's difficult to get a reaction directly. So how do you ask, a natural question that you haven't written down? How do you get that across?
Well, as the industry if I need or any from when we relay it
Yeah, so during the actual interview itself, if Josh has any follow-up questions or during any of the questions process, then he'll relay it to either me or one of his other PAs and then we'll just put the question out there. So it catches them off guard even more.
However, for 1 week in December. My team more full for some reason. He understood with my essence was said in my so him said
Yeah. So, for example, we get the odd interview where the person we're interviewing is actually quite capable of understanding Josh's communication. So, before the pandemic, we interviewed the comedian Marcus Brigstock, and he was one of those rare subjects where he could actually converse with Josh quite easily. But for the purpose of the recording, we had to sort of stop him every now and then, so then I could actually still input and relay what Josh was saying for the purpose of the recording and relay the question that we were asking in the first place.
That's quite a talent by your guest. You've got such a varied amount of guests. I know it's difficult to say, have you got a favourite and have you got a worst? What was the worst moment in some of those interviews?
You actually want him to say this on the recording? Or shall we save that for off camera?
All right. Well, I'll ask what you asked then, which is your proudest interview. Which was your one that you've got there up at the top on the shelf?
I'll give you
I'll give you a handful.
I was lucky enough in the listen to my writers go for the time that were very
Josh was lucky enough to interview the writers Galton and Simpson before they sadly passed away. So that's one of the special ones to Josh.
and people like Barry Corner Jimmy Tarbuck.
And then people like Barry Cryer and Jimmy Tarbuck, they were special ones as well.
I like the ability to go right back to early years of life.
He likes to have the ability to go back all the way to the start of live entertainment, so going back decades and decades really.
What about modern light entertainment? Who would you like to interview?
I would love to interview
He would love to interview Michael McIntyre.
He was born
Because he was born into entertainment.
His dad was very right in the
Because his dad wrote the Kenny Everett show.
Yes, that's interesting. So when you do an interview, that's fairly straightforward, but writing a book is more work?
Well, actually, in I normally write a little
After each interview that Josh does, he does a little article afterwards, a little write-up, a follow-up piece on it.
When I will write the book, I learned that if we
Yeah, so when it came to writing the book, he already had the pieces that he did per interview, so he could use that to fall back on and then you dove a bit deeper. Yeah, that's what you're trying to say. He dove deeper and elongated and expanded on each interview.
That will only consider the room and
Yeah, so that's when he could bring in the social and economic part of their careers and delve a bit deeper into that. Yeah.
Well, beyond the title is what it's called, but the book is a yearbook. Does that mean there's going to be more than one?
Well, his name is I continue beyond the title with the same momentum
Yeah, who knows if he continues with Beyond the Title with the same momentum that he has at the moment. Yeah, who knows what could come.
But I was lucky enough to get the legendary public client right so I want him to see the network of better hurry up.
Yeah, he was lucky enough to have Barry Cry do the foreword for this book here, and well, if he wants to do another one, he might have to hurry up.
And you're going back on tour?
Yeah, we go to the south on the second of
Yeah, so we got the first show on the 2nd of October at the Museum of Comedy in London, and that's with the comedian Arthur Smith.
And then we at the common point.
Then we've actually got the second show 2 weeks later on the 16th of October at Gurnard Pines, and that is with the ventriloquist Steve Hewlett. And you can see a little poster there, that's just a subtle plug.
Indeed. It's quite a tough thing to do, put yourself in front of an audience and expect them to ask questions. I mean, you're much on the spot there, It's a brave thing to do.
Well, I'm not
Josh isn't the one asking the questions with these shows that he's got going on.
I got a great feeling who's there on my behalf.
Yeah, so Josh has got a great comedian called Phil Reed doing it on his behalf, being the voice of the shows.
And we worked closely together, so he's no mom, go.
And they've worked closely together, so Phil knows Josh's style and how he wants the shows to be conducted.
What about politicians? Have you done a politician?
Yeah, yeah, still Michael Howard.
You've interviewed Michael Howard.
And
Stanley Johnson. Edwina Curry.
Are they all light entertainment or they're a bit serious?
I Stanley Johnson. I get found a bit now.
At the time of the interview with Stanley Johnson, Stanley himself wouldn't get off of Instagram, so Josh found that a bit bizarre. He's quite active on social media, wasn't he? Yeah.
He's about 3 photos.
Yeah, he must have posted about 3 photos of Josh during that time.
Well, Josh, I admire you greatly what you do, and having all those people that you interview it is a great skill to have, and long may it continue. And we look forward to the next yearbook.
Well, it might not be next year. Oh, yeah. So, technically, not a year, but
yeah, so it won't be next year or the year after, so technically it's not a yearbook, so it might just be a book.
Thank you very much for participating in the Isle of Wight Literary Festival. If you've enjoyed this presentation, please consider making a donation. Follow the Donate Now button from the homepage of our website. You can also benefit from great discounts by ordering via Blackwell's Bookshop from our homepage. We'd like to thank the loyal sponsors and supporters who've sustained the Isle of Wight Literary Festival over the past years. Without their financial contribution, it will be difficult to attract the many wonderful speakers we've hosted, while keeping ticket prices down. This year, their support has enabled us to provide the digital festival free of charge.